In 1973, in the quiet expanse of the Texas Permian Basin, a discovery was made. It was not oil, it was not gold. It was something far stranger, something that would change our understanding of life on this planet. Prospectors found an opening, a vast hole leading deep into the earth. But this was no ordinary cave. The walls were not rock, they were living tissue, they were flesh. This was the entrance to an enormous, subterranean creature, a superorganism of impossible size. For years, scientists studied it in secret, trying to understand what it was. They named it Immanus Colossius, but the world would come to know it by a simpler, more captivating name, the Mystery Flesh Pit. The creature was a world unto itself. It was so big that its full size is still unknown. It has systems like a living animal. It has a throat, a stomach, and lungs that breathe deep within the earth. In the 1980s, a bold decision was made. The U.S. government, along with a company called Anodyne Deep Earth Mining, decided to turn this biological wonder into a national park. It was a place where families could go on vacation. They could travel deep inside a living being. They could see strange, beautiful sights inside the creature's body. The park became a symbol of human curiosity and our power to explore the unknown. Inside the park, visitors could ride elevators down the creature's giant throat. They could walk on viewing platforms built into the fleshy walls. They saw rivers of digestive fluid and forests of strange biological structures. Anodyne, the company that managed the park, built hotels and restaurants on the surface. They built complex machinery to keep the park safe and the giant creature calm. For over 20 years, the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park was seen as a triumph. It was a place where nature and technology met. It was a place of wonder, a place that felt completely safe. But this feeling of safety was a dangerous illusion. The relationship between humanity and the superorganism was delicate. We were visitors in a place that was not made for us. Anodyne's job was to manage this fragile piece. They used technology to control the creature's environment. They pumped fluids and managed the air to keep the organism from reacting to the thousands of people inside it. The park was more than just a tourist spot. It was a complex industrial site. Millions of people visited without any problems. They left with amazing stories and souvenirs. But beneath the surface, hidden from the happy tourists, the systems that kept them safe were slowly, quietly, breaking down. No one knew that this incredible wonder was about to become a place of terror. July 4, 2007, America's Independence Day. At the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, the mood was festive. Thousands of visitors filled the park, excited for a day of unique adventure and a special fireworks show planned for the evening. The weather, however, had other plans. Dark clouds gathered over the Texas landscape. Soon, a heavy, unseasonable rain began to fall. It was not just a light shower, it was a deluge. The ground quickly became soaked, and water began to pool everywhere on the surface. The rain was more than the park's drainage systems were designed to handle. This simple change in weather was the first small step toward a terrible disaster. Because of the relentless rain, the park management made an announcement. The much-anticipated fireworks display had to be canceled. To make up for the disappointment, they decided to do something else. They announced that the park would extend its hours. Visitors could stay longer and continue to explore the wonders deep inside the pit. For the families and tourists, this seemed like a nice gesture. It was a chance to spend more time in the amazing biological world below. But for the park's infrastructure, this decision created a major problem. The systems were already under stress, and now they would have to run for longer, with more people inside than usual. Park staff, like Ranger Jason Schmidt, felt a growing sense of unease. "We were all a bit worried about the rain," he would later recall. "It was coming down harder than I had ever seen out there. We had drainage pumps to keep water from getting into the main orifice, but that day, they were working overtime. We trusted the systems, though. We were told by Anodyne that everything had backups, that everything was fail-safe. We had no reason to believe that a little rain could cause any real trouble." This trust in the system was shared by everyone, from the lowest-level staff to the highest-level managers. Inside the pit, the atmosphere was still magical. Families walked along the illuminated trails, marveling at the pulsating walls around them. In the lower visitor center, a large facility suspended deep within the creature, people enjoyed food and looked out the large windows at the incredible biological landscape. They were hundreds of feet below the surface, protected by steel and concrete. They felt safe, completely unaware of the danger growing above them. The rainwater on the surface was beginning to overwhelm the faulty drainage systems. A deadly chain of events had already begun, and the people celebrating inside the living giant were at the center of it all. At 9:41 p.m., the first critical failure occurred. The main water drainage pumps, which were working hard to keep the massive amount of rainwater from flowing into the creature's orifice, suddenly stopped. A key electrical part had failed. A backup pump was supposed to start automatically, but it did not. It was corroded and broken from poor maintenance. With nothing to stop it, a massive flood of cold rainwater poured directly into the superorganism's upper respiratory system. For the giant creature, it was like a person suddenly inhaling a large amount of water. Its body's natural reaction was immediate and violent. It began to choke. Deep underground, the first sign of trouble for the visitors was a sudden, low rumble. The fleshy walls of the pit began to tremble. At first, many thought it was just a normal part of being inside a living creature. But then the tremors grew stronger. The entire structure of the park, the walkways and viewing platforms, began to shake violently. Lights flickered. People stumbled and looked around in confusion and growing fear. The creature was convulsing, trying to clear its flooded airways. It was a reflex, a simple biological response, but its immense power was more than the man-made structures inside it could handle. This choking action placed enormous stress on the park's support systems. The lower visitor center, a massive structure held in place by 6 huge hydraulic arms, was hit the hardest. These arms were designed to move with the creature's normal, slow movements, but the sudden, violent spasms were too much for them. The supports groaned under the strain. Alarms began to blare throughout the facility, a sound that cut through the confused shouts of the visitors. The floor started to tilt. People screamed as they slid across the room, grabbing onto tables and railings to keep from falling. The wonder of the park had vanished, replaced by pure terror. From the surface, rescue teams could only watch in horror. The ground itself was shaking. A deep, gurgling sound rose from the pit's opening. They knew something was terribly wrong, but their ability to help was limited. The main elevators used to enter the pit were now unsafe. The shaking was too violent. Radio communications with the staff inside the lower visitor center became frantic and broken. The staff below were trying to calm the panicked crowds while also trying to understand what was happening. They were trapped, deep inside a creature that was now fighting for its own life, and tearing their world apart in the process. As panic grew in the lower visitor center, the anodyne engineers on the surface made a fateful decision. They believed the shaking was caused by an electrical problem. At 9:51 p.m., they tried to fix it by resetting the entire power grid. For 45 long seconds, the entire park was plunged into absolute darkness. The emergency lights failed to turn on. Deep inside the pit, this sudden blackness turned fear into chaos. People already struggling to stand on a tilting floor were now blind. They screamed and cried out in the dark, unable to see what was happening. It was during this power outage that the creature's choking spasms did the most damage, weakening the already stressed supports of the visitor center. When the power finally returned, the situation was visibly worse. The stability systems for the lower visitor center tried to correct the tilt, but they overcorrected. With a sound like thunder, 2 of the 6 massive structural supports were torn from their foundations in the creature's flesh. The entire building lurched violently, now listing at a terrifying 20-degree angle. Everything that was not bolted down, tables, chairs, even people, slid toward the lower side of the room, crashing against the large observation windows. The windows, designed to withstand immense pressure, began to crack. The people inside were no longer just in a shaking room. They were in a building that was actively breaking apart. The engineers at Anodyne had one last, desperate option. It was a fail-safe system that had never been tested in a real emergency. At 10:12 p.m., an automated system injected 20,000 liters of a powerful toxin called aconitine into the superorganism. The chemical was supposed to act as a powerful sedative to calm the creature down. Instead, it had the opposite effect. It acted as a violent stimulant. The creature's convulsions became even more intense, more powerful than anything the engineers thought possible. These titanic spasms were the final blow. The remaining supports for the lower visitor center broke, and the entire structure began to fall, sliding slowly into a deep cavity in the creature's throat. For the people trapped inside the falling visitor center, it was the beginning of the end. The building groaned and tore apart around them. Dr. Eris Thorne, a geologist visiting the park, described the moment. The sound was indescribable. It was the sound of metal screaming, of a building dying. We were sliding, not falling. but sliding into darkness. People were holding on to anything they could, trying to climb up the tilted floor. We looked out the windows and saw only the moving, raw flesh of the pit walls scraping by. We knew we were being swallowed. The failsafe that was meant to save them had instead sealed their fate, pushing the disaster into its most horrific phase. The fall of the lower visitor center was not a quick drop. It was a slow, grinding descent into the depths of the superorganism. The massive structure scraped against the fleshy walls of the creature's gullet, which was constricting and spasming in reaction to the aconitine poison. Inside the broken facility, survivors huddled together in terror. The building's lights flickered and died, leaving them in a terrifying dim red glow from the emergency lighting. The air became thick and hard to breathe. The sounds of the creature's groans and the building's tearing metal were constant. They were no longer tourists in a park. They were now foreign objects inside a dying body. From the surface control room, Anodyne staff listened helplessly to the final radio transmissions from inside the falling center. A park ranger made a final, desperate call, describing the scene. "The windows are gone. It's coming in. The fluid. Peristalsis, the muscular contractions that move food through a digestive tract, had taken hold of the building. The creature's body was trying to swallow the visitor center. Torrents of digestive fluids, a caustic substance known as lactogastric chyma, began to flood the broken structure. The fluid was not just a liquid. It was a thick, acidic slurry that started to dissolve everything it touched. The experience for those trapped was beyond imagination. Survivor testimony is rare and fragmented, pieced together from the few who were later rescued from upper levels. One survivor, a maintenance worker named Samuel Coe, was on a catwalk above the visitor center when it fell. "I saw it go," he said, his voice still shaking years later. "It just slid away into the dark. I heard the screams over the radio for a few minutes, and then just static. I saw the fluids, like a river of milk and acid, pouring down into the hole where the center used to be. It was like watching a ship sink into a red, living ocean. The fate of the hundreds of people inside the lower visitor center was sealed. The building was pulled deeper and deeper into the digestive tract of the superorganism. The combination of crushing pressure from the peristaltic action and the corrosive digestive fluids left no hope for survival. In its final moments, the building was completely broken apart and consumed. The official investigation report later concluded that the facility and everyone inside were subjected to complete mastication and digestion. It was a horrific end to what was supposed to be a day of family fun. A stark reminder that they were inside a living, and now very hostile, creature. The aconitine poison and the falling visitor center pushed the superorganism into a new, even more violent reaction. The creature was not just choking anymore. It was now trying to vomit. At 10:17 p.m., a series of powerful, deep spasms began. These convulsions forced the massive volume of digestive fluid, the lactogastric chyma, up from its stomach. This caustic slurry shot up through the creature's main throat, the same path visitors used to descend. On the surface, rescue workers and remaining visitors heard a deafening roar building from the pit's orifice. They had only moments to react before the eruption began. A geyser of thick, acidic fluid erupted from the mouth of the pit, shooting several hundred meters into the night sky. The sheer volume of the ejecta was immense. It came down like a hot chemical rain, covering everything for miles around. Cars in the parking lot were crushed under the weight of the falling slurry. Buildings near the orifice had their roofs and walls damaged. The fluid was highly acidic and immediately began to burn skin and dissolve materials. People on the surface ran for their lives, trying to find shelter from the horrific downpour. The air filled with a sickening, sour smell, and visibility dropped to near zero in the strange biological storm. The chaos on the surface was absolute. Emergency services were overwhelmed. The ejecta made roads impassable and created a hazardous chemical environment. But the horror was not over. At 10:19 p.m., the ground began to shake with a new intensity. 30 to 100 kilometers away from the main park, parts of the superorganism, giant limbs or appendages, began to break through the bedrock. The creature was so large that its body extended far beyond the park itself. The tremors from these surfacing limbs were felt as far away as the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, causing widespread panic. The disaster was no longer contained to the park. It was becoming a regional catastrophe. Back at the park, an even stranger event unfolded. At 12:35 a.m., the organism ejected 3 other life forms from its orifice. These were not parts of the superorganism itself, but creatures that lived inside it, like parasites. These smaller, aggressive creatures, thrown onto the surface in the chaos, immediately began to attack people. They injured 15 visitors and hunted down 7 others before park security was able to kill them. The disaster had revealed another terrifying truth. The mystery flesh pit was not just one creature but an entire ecosystem, filled with unknown dangers that were now loose on the surface. In the hours and days following the eruption, the full scale of the disaster became clear. The area around the mystery flesh pit was a scene of devastation. Emergency crews in hazardous material suits worked to rescue survivors and recover the victims. The official count was over 750 fatalities, with more than 1,800 people suffering major injuries from the eruption, the collapsing structures, and the acidic ejecta. In the weeks that followed, another 18,000 people in the surrounding communities sought medical help for respiratory problems and skin conditions caused by contact with the airborne gastric fluids. The park, once a symbol of wonder, was now a sealed-off disaster zone. The corporate and political fallout was immediate and severe. Anodyne Deep Earth Mining, the company that operated the park, was found to be directly responsible. A federal investigation revealed years of negligence. Critical safety equipment, like the backup water pump, had not been properly maintained. Warnings from their own engineers about corrosion and system weaknesses had been ignored to cut costs. The company had fostered a culture that prioritized profits over safety. Faced with overwhelming lawsuits and public outrage, Anodyne Incorporated declared bankruptcy in late 2008. The name Anodyne became synonymous with corporate greed and catastrophic failure. The United States government's response was drastic. During the height of the crisis, as the creature's limbs began to surface, the Pentagon had authorized the use of nuclear weapons if the organism became fully mobile. Thankfully, that option was never needed. A final, desperate fail-safe measure, activated from the collapsing lower visitor center, had managed to calm the creature's spasms. In the aftermath, the government permanently closed the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park to the public. The area was placed under a strict military quarantine, and a new entity was formed to manage the ongoing crisis. This new entity, rising from the ashes of Anodyne, was called the Permian Basin Recovery and Superorganism Containment Corporation. It was essentially the old company with a new name and a new critical mission, not to entertain, but to contain. Their job was to ensure that the superorganism remained dormant and that a disaster like the one on July 4, 2007, could never happen again. The age of tourism was over. The age of containment had begun. The Mystery Flesh Pit was no longer a park. It was a permanent and terrifying threat that had to be managed, 24 hours a day. Today, nearly 2 decades after the disaster, the Mystery Flesh Pit is silent. The colorful signs and happy tourists are gone, replaced by fences, warning signs, and military patrols. The primary mission at the site is containment. The Permian Basin Recovery and Superorganism Containment Corporation employs a complex and multi-layered strategy to keep the giant creature in a state of forced dormancy. This is not a simple task. It requires a constant, delicate, and dangerous balancing act. They are essentially trying to keep a giant asleep, knowing that if it wakes up, the consequences could be even worse than in 2007. The containment protocol is a grim form of life support in reverse. Instead of helping the creature, it is designed to weaken it. A constant supply of powerful anesthetics is pumped into its system to keep it unconscious. Its massive muscles are fatigued with inorganic phosphates. Its bone structures are slowly weakened with acid to prevent powerful movements. Even the air it breathes is controlled. Carbon dioxide-rich air, including the exhaust from the facility's own machinery, is pumped into its lungs to induce a state of mild hypoxia, or oxygen deprivation. It is a cruel, but necessary strategy for survival. To prevent the creature from waking up due to hunger, the corporation also manages its diet. They continue to extract nutrient-rich materials from its body, but they replace them with tons of inert gravel and filler. This tricks the organism's biology into feeling full without providing any actual energy. This constant management requires a massive industrial operation, far more complex than the one that supported the old park. This new operation is a permanent fixture on the Texas landscape, a constant reminder of the power that lies sleeping just beneath the surface. Despite all these efforts, the official government report on the disaster offered a chilling conclusion. It stated that all current containment measures are likely temporary. The report concluded that it is unrealistic to believe that mankind will be able to seriously damage or eliminate such an organism. The experts believe that it is not a matter of if the Permian Basin superorganism will awaken, but when. The new corporation's work is not a permanent solution. It is a strategy to buy time, to delay the inevitable day when the titan beneath Texas decides to wake up and move. The Mystery Flesh Pit disaster of 2007 serves as a dark and powerful lesson. It is a story about the dangers of hubris, the belief that we can control forces of nature that we do not fully understand. For years, we treated a living, breathing creature of unimaginable scale as a simple tourist attraction. We built our hotels and our gift shops on the back of a giant, and we were shocked when it shrugged. The failure was not just one of faulty pumps or corroded cables. The failure was in our perspective. We saw a wonder to be exploited, not a power to be respected. The price for that mistake was paid in hundreds of lives. The legacy of the disaster extends far beyond the sealed-off park. It has forced us to ask difficult questions about exploration and risk. How far should we go in our quest for knowledge and profit? When we discover something truly new and powerful, is our first instinct to understand it, or to sell tickets to it? The story of Anodyne Incorporated is a cautionary tale of corporate negligence, a reminder that cutting corners on safety can lead to catastrophic consequences. The disaster showed the fragile line between a technological marvel and a technological nightmare. It proved that even our most advanced systems are only as strong as their weakest, most neglected part. Today, the world lives in the shadow of the pit. The containment efforts continue, a constant and expensive battle to keep the creature asleep. But the official reports tell us this is a temporary peace. The final report on the incident advises that we must prepare our society for the inevitability of the Permian Basin superorganism emerging from dormancy. This means the story is not over. The greatest danger may still lie ahead. The disaster was not the end of the story, but perhaps just the end of the first chapter. The giant is still there, sleeping, breathing, deep beneath the ground. What can we learn from the abyss? We can learn humility. We can learn respect for the unknown. The universe is filled with wonders far beyond our comprehension, and we are but small visitors in it. The Mystery Flesh Pit taught us that when we stare into the abyss, sometimes the abyss is a living thing, staring back, and we must be prepared for its response. The silence from the pit today is not an absence of danger, but a constant, quiet warning. We disturbed a sleeping giant, and one day, it will inevitably wake up. We can only hope that we will be ready.